A jury of one's peers. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean today? What did it mean back then? What does it mean going forward? And we gotta understand the crazy in order to get through the crazy. When you think about a jury of your peers are not showing up. If you get that notice to be on jury duty, please show up. There are obvious injustices, but the sad part is many people are like overlooking that stuff or just downplaying it. We do things every day that we don't want to do that may just impact our little selves and our own little bubbles. However, show up for somebody. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It's your man, Soul Toucha the Poet here, King in Our Life podcast. And I'm about to do one real quick. I am preparedly unprepared. If that's not a phrase, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We just gonna have a little fun here. We're gonna talk about a jury of one's peers. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean today? What did it mean back then? What does it mean going forward? You know what I'm saying? Things is crazy. They have been crazy. And we got to understand the crazy in order to get through the crazy. What has sparked this conversation? So I would listen to my girl, Rajava the Ruler, and she was talking about how she blew trial because she spent time incarcerated in the Florida system. She was talking about a jury of her peers and how no one looked like her, was from her background, and this, that, and the other. And when you think about a jury of your peers, the first thing that comes to mind is they don't look like me. They not my age. They don't come from the same neighborhood, you know, things of that nature. So it kind of sparked my attention because I did find that interesting. So let's get into it. We have to look at this question of fairness in the justice system. You know, many of us, even to this day, many of us, we come from a certain background and we experience certain things that many others don't. Now, from what I gather, from what I know, from what I've seen on TV, YouTube, the news, this, that, and the other, in certain circumstances, no one is exempt from the imbalance of our justice system. No one is immune to it. What I mean by that, if you stroll back, journey way back in time where, you know, we were considered 3/5 of a man and no, we weren't considered human. But then you have to look at the social class of the people back in the day, because a lot of them, European settlers and whatever the case may be, they were considered indentured servants. They weren't considered whole people, or they weren't given, you know, the same equal rights as the more prominent individuals that were in the society. So we have to look at things from that lens as well. But, you know, a jury of one's peers, you know, it is a cornerstone of our justice system. But again, is it relevant today? But then you really have to put yourself in several situations. And at the same time, you have to exclude yourself from certain situations because everything does not apply to you. What do I mean by that? If I take myself, for instance, in the location of Maryland that I'm in, I am in close proximity of lower class, middle class, upper class, different backgrounds, racial identities, religions, genders, this, that, and the other. I am surrounded by all of those elements. However, a lot of things that some people experience, I just don't experience. There was a time when I first moved out here, I was behaving like the common people. Now, I don't mean common people in a derogatory term. What I mean is people who just acted like they didn't have no goddamn sense. Let's just keep it that way. You know, I hung around those people. I didn't get into all the things that they did. However, you know, I did have to deal with the law on certain stupid occasions because of my own ignorance and stupidity. Let's keep it real. So let's look at the historical glimpse of jury of one peers and where that kind of originates from. It originates from the Magna Carta 1215. And briefly mentions protection against tyranny. Now, let me go to my other notes right quick, because when I was looking up this stuff, I came across a few things. But the root of it is pretty much no one was against the law. The kings and all of that stuff. That's pretty much what that was. It protect people from tyranny. And also inclusion of community voice. So the community had a say in what was going on. So let's look at the legal interpretation. Courts define peers as a jury drawn from a fair cross-section of the community. Now, again, as Rajava was saying, none of them look like her. So when you look at a cross-section of the community, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Now, the other thing, I want to veer off track a little bit. The one thing that stuck out to me that she did not say that is kind of relevant in her case, in the case of a lot of people, is when you think about a jury of your peers are not showing up. So let's keep that in mind, because we can say the justice system is unfair. We can say a whole bunch of things that are actually factual, but then we have to actually look at what facts are not being discussed. Because I know a lot of people that look like me in my age group, my economic class, and things of that nature. When they get that letter for jury duty, they either find a way to disqualify themselves. Yeah, that's what they do. They find a way to disqualify themselves or make it so that they're not chosen, or hope and pray that they're not chosen. What does that do to the average person, especially a person of a minority class? You're shorting that person out. That's what you're doing. That's what you're actually doing. You're giving that person an unfair chance in a courtroom, because when those jury notices come out and you say, oh, I don't want to go to jury duty, and you find a way to get out of it, that person that looks like you is not going to have a jury of their peers. They're going to have a jury of a cross section of the county, the city, or whatever the case may be. Because I guarantee you, when they get in there and they look at the jury selection, they like, none of them people look like me. But then you got to go bang on them doors and be like, yo, when you get that jury duty notice, you need to show up. You need to show up. On top of that, let's also include the part about voting. Because again, another factor in that is if you do not vote, regardless of your racial background, your thoughts of the justice system, your thoughts on politics, your economic class, or anything like that, if you do not vote, you're not helping your neighbor, your friend, your family member, or whatever the case may be. You're not helping the people that look like you if you don't vote. So keep that in mind, because a lot of people like to opt out of voting in this, that, and the other. But here's the thing, or opt out of jury duty. But here's the thing. When you do that, you're leaving your fellow neighbor out to dry. Just keep that in mind. Another thing that I want to point out, I don't think that people with felonies and stuff like that can be on jury duty. I'm not sure of that. Don't quote me on that right now, but I'm going to assume, I'm just going to go on the assumption that that's the case. And if that's the case, again, a jury of your peers, it's not going to happen. One thing that I did hear, though, people are in the military or have military family members or law enforcement or, people in those professions, they can get excused from jury duty. However, what I did hear from a legal person is that the defense will typically not select a person for jury duty that has a military background, law enforcement background, or things of that nature, because they are kind of biased towards doing the right thing, we'll say. That's what the idea is. I understand that. However, you can't paint everybody in the military, law enforcement, whatever, with the same brush, because, some of us do come from those backgrounds. So you definitely got to keep that in mind when those biases are put out there. Because, really, I've done a lot of dumb stuff in my life that has, had me in courtrooms and stuff like that. And at the same time, at the time I was like, oh, this is unfair. This is dumb, blah, blah, blah. But then after I do that, I look back and say, yeah, that was dumb. And now I'm at the point, and for a while I've been at the point to where it's like, I don't understand why you're doing stupid stuff when it's so easy to do the right thing and not get caught up in the nonsense. That's one thing that I think about. So let's look at the key challenges of representation. You have socioeconomic factors. This is the impact on jury duty on individuals. So the one thing that I have understood about some people not wanting to be selected for jury duty when it comes to socioeconomic factors is they'll miss pay for work, because when you go to jury duty, not all employers will pay you the difference of your salary for being on jury duty. So you got to keep that in mind. For some people, let's just say they are cleared or qualified for jury duty. However, there's no incentive for them, because like I'm going in there for jury duty and I'm getting paid $25 a day. They may not see that as an incentive for them to be on jury duty. But again, you have to think, if you don't want to be on jury duty because of whatever reason, let's just say it's because you may get $25 a day, you have to think. You have to think beyond yourself. Selfless service to your community. You have to think of those things. But some people don't think that. They don't care about that. They just look at that. I'm not going to sit on no jury. I'm not for $25 a day. I'm not sitting in nobody's courtroom. I don't like the law. I don't like this. I don't like that. But, the problem with all of that and a lot of things that go on in today's society, especially in America, people are like, if it does not affect me directly, I don't care about it. I understand that thought process. However, that doesn't make it right. Because one day something is going to affect you and you're going to wish that someone stood up and raised their hand and say, hey, that ain't right. Everybody has that thing that comes up in their life. Let's look at racial and ethnic bias, ongoing challenges in achieving true diversity. Now, you also have to look at when a jury is being selected, they may not want a certain demographic in that jury booth because of certain reasons. And I can assume until the sun goes up and down again, and the cow jumps over the moon. I could just assume all day long. So they may not want a whole bunch of minorities on the jury. They may not, they may not even want a whole bunch of women on the jury. They may not want a whole bunch of men, depending on the case. You just never know. So, you have to take into consideration, all the factors that go into jury selection. For Dyer, the process of jury selection and its role. They may do a background check on you when you're going up for jury duty. And there may be some things in your life, they may not be bad, they may not be disqualifying, but you don't want your dirty laundry aired out in the streets like that. That may be the case. That just may be the case. Looking at my other notes, jury pool demographic versus defendant demographics. I kind of touched on that. You may have a young black male, 20s, whatever the case may be. You may not want some black mothers on the jury. You may not want some black fathers on a jury. Hell, you may not want sympathetic white women on a jury. You just don't know. It's so many factors that go into it. Talking about socioeconomic, geographic representation issues. We've all seen it. We've all seen where a court case gets moved from one jurisdiction to another because this person is not going to get a fair trial, or the outcome may not sway in the direction that either the prosecution or defense may be looking at. Who gets excluded? And I already mentioned occupational exemptions. I mentioned financial hardship dismissals, implicit bias in selection. Those are all things. Now, these notes right here, they're talking about current solution. It may say expand jury pool sourcing. How do you do that effectively if people are finding ways to get out of jury duty? I haven't been selected for jury duty, I want to say, I don't even remember the last time I was sent the notice for jury duty. It's been that long. Probably more than 10 years, I would say. Because we in 2025 now. Yeah, probably 10 years since I've been selected for jury duty. That's a minute. That is a minute. Yeah, when I think about that, that's crazy that I haven't been selected for jury. haven't got a jury duty up notes in forever. Let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses of a jury of one peers. Benefits is community voice, diverse perspectives on common issues. So if it's truly, a jury of your peers and a cross section of your community, you may get a diverse perspective on that. Hell, maybe if you expand the pool a little bit, you may get diverse perspectives on that. Checks and balances, safeguard against injustice. I don't know. That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one with me because in today's climate, and let's just say over the last 10, 15 years, particularly the last 10 years, things have gotten a lot very toxic out there, and people seem to be biased. They have a strong bias, one side or another. And I can't say this with conviction, but there seems to be little balance in the middle, very little balance in the middle. And I guess you can blame that on media, social media, and things of that nature. Social media, because, everybody is looking at social media for their news. There's always bots and this, that, and the other. And, you got, hardliners on either side of the spectrum that got big platforms with podcasts and things of this nature. So you got to take that into consideration because it seems like everyone is so divided when it comes to a lot of issues. Like there are obvious injustices that occur every day. But the sad part is that many people are like overlooking that stuff or just downplaying it. And that's really nothing new because that's been going on for a long time, way before my time. You look at criticism, bias are going to persist. That's inherently human. Every person has a bias towards something, and it really does not, that crosses racial barriers, age barriers, gender barriers. To me, it doesn't matter if I'm on jury duty and I'm looking at a certain case or a certain individual. I really don't care what their skin color is. I don't care what their age is. I don't care what their upbringing was, this, that, and the other. If they're on trial for a certain thing, and I think that person could have been doing better with their life based on what they are charged with, I'm going to have a bias. I'm definitely going to take into consideration all the evidence that's put before me. However, in my head, I'm gonna be like, why would you get caught up in something like that? Like, why? Some things just don't make sense to me. But yeah, I just wanted to hop on that for a minute. I mean, when you think about jury duty, the composition does matter. It really does matter. So people, please, if you get that notice to be on jury duty, please show up. We do things every day that we don't want to do, that may just impact our little selves and our own little bubbles. However, show up for somebody. It doesn't matter what your income is. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, no matter what state you live in. It doesn't matter what your upbringing was. None of it matters. Show up for somebody. Just do that. Y'all out there, call to action. Again, when you get that notice, show up. When it's time to vote, show up. You might have a prosecutor or a state's attorney or a judge that just is not balanced, just not doing people right. But if you don't show up and put someone in there that's better to be representative of all, you make the justice system just a little better at some aspect. So show up. And, a jury of peers, it's for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Peace. So Toucha the Poet King and I Like podcast, and I'll holler at y'all in the next one. Peace.